There is a level of discipline that doesn't inspire people. It unsettles them, not because it's loud or aggressive, but because it's quiet, permanent and unmoving. You've seen it before, even if you didn't know how to name it. That person who shows up the same way every day. Not excited, not motivated, not posting about it, just doing what they said they would do without hesitation. They don't complain. They don't explain. And somehow, that consistency makes people uncomfortable. Not impressed, not inspired, but defensive. Because extreme consistency doesn't attack your ego directly. It exposes it. It forces a comparison no one asked for. And the comparison isn't about talent or intelligence, it's about reliability. Most people believe discipline is about effort, but effort is socially acceptable. Consistency is not. Effort allows excuses. Consistency removes them. That's why people cheer motivation and quietly resent discipline. Motivation feels human. Discipline feels inhuman. And that's exactly why it works. If you're honest with yourself, you already know this. You know that the hardest part isn't starting. It never was. You've started dozens of times. New routines, new habits, new promises to yourself that felt real in the moment. You woke up early for a week. You stayed consistent for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks. And then something shifted. Not dramatically, not with failure or collapse, just a small internal permission, a negotiation, a delay. And suddenly you were back where you started, telling yourself you'd restart when things were calmer, clearer, easier. And the most frustrating part wasn't that you quit. It was that you couldn't explain why. You knew what to do. You knew it mattered. You even wanted the outcome. But something invisible always pulled you back. That invisible force isn't laziness, it's identity protection. Most people don't fail because discipline is hard. They fail because discipline threatens who they believe they are. Inconsistency is familiar. It's safe. It allows you to maintain a self-image that says, "I could be disciplined if I really wanted to." That sentence protects you from final judgment, because as long as you're inconsistent, your potential is still theoretical. The moment you become consistent, the theory ends. Results become real, limits become visible. And that's terrifying. Consistency removes ambiguity. It tells the truth, not just to others, but to you. That's why people unconsciously sabotage it. They don't want to know how capable they really are, or worse, how limited they might be. So, they reset. Again and again. New starts feel hopeful. Continuation feels dangerous. There's a particular kind of person this hits hardest. Not the lazy or the careless, but the capable. The ones who read, learn, plan, and understand. The ones who know the language of improvement but can't seem to embody it. They blame willpower. They blame timing. They blame circumstances. But deep down, they sense something else is at play. They notice how discipline feels different from motivation. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation asks how you feel. Discipline doesn't ask at all. And that silence is what most people can't tolerate. Silence forces confrontation. No cheering voice, no reward, just repetition, day after day. That's when the mind starts to panic. Not because it's hard, but because it's permanent. This is where fear enters the picture. Not fear of effort, but fear of exposure. Extreme discipline exposes patterns you can't hide from anymore. You can't blame bad days, you can't blame mood, you can't romanticize struggle. You either showed up or you didn't. And when you do show up repeatedly, something uncomfortable happens. Other people notice, not because you talk about it, but because your behavior stops matching theirs. And that difference creates tension. They start asking questions, making jokes, offering concern. They'll say you're taking it too seriously, that you need balance, that life isn't meant to be so rigid. But what they're really responding to isn't your behavior. It's the mirror you've become. Your consistency quietly asks a question they don't want to answer. If you can do it without drama, why can't they? At this stage, most people retreat, not because they want to quit, but because they want relief. Relief from being seen, relief from standing out, relief from the pressure that consistency creates simply by existing. They tell themselves discipline should feel lighter, more flexible, more fun. But discipline was never designed to feel good. It was designed to feel inevitable. And inevitability scares people because it removes choice. Choice is comforting. Choice allows escape. The ability to say, "not today," keeps the ego alive. Consistency threatens that safety net. It doesn't ask for daily permission. It just continues. And when something continues without your emotions attached, you start to realize how much of your life has been driven by moods instead of principles. There's a moment, usually early on, when this becomes clear. A moment when you realize the problem was never that you couldn't stay consistent. It's that you never fully decided to be. You kept leaving an exit open. A small one, but enough. You wanted discipline with an expiration date, something you could stop if it got uncomfortable. But real discipline doesn't work like that. The kind that changes people removes the exit before you even start. And that's the part no one tells you because it sounds extreme. It sounds unhealthy. It sounds obsessive. But obsession is emotional. Discipline is mechanical. And mechanics don't care how you feel. Once you understand this, you start seeing consistency differently. You stop asking how to stay motivated and start asking what you're still negotiating. Where are you leaving room to escape? What part of your routine still depends on how you feel that day? Those are the weak points, not because they're wrong, but because they're human. And discipline at its highest level is intentionally inhuman. It doesn't respond to excuses, context, or emotion. It responds to structure. That's why it looks frightening from the outside. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't slow down to be relatable. And that's exactly why it works. Most people will never reach this level. Not because they can't, but because they don't want to lose the version of themselves that always has a reason. Discipline at this level feels like a threat because it is one. A threat to inconsistency. A threat to identity. A threat to comfort. And before you can build it, you have to admit something uncomfortable. The part of you that keeps quitting isn't weak. It's protective. It's trying to keep you safe from finality, from permanence, from becoming someone who can no longer hide behind potential. Once you see that, the question stops being how to build discipline. It becomes whether you're ready to remove choice entirely. Because the moment choice disappears, discipline doesn't need to be forced. It appears.
What most people misunderstand about real transformation is that it doesn't begin with ambition, it begins with exposure. Exposure to discomfort, to inconsistency, to the parts of yourself that fail the moment conditions aren't ideal. This is where the system revealed by Miyamoto Musashi becomes disturbing, because it doesn't ask you to become better. It forces you to confront what makes you unreliable. Musashi never spoke about building strength by stacking habits or collecting techniques. His method was surgical. Identify the dependency, remove it. Identify the reaction, neutralize it. Identify the weakness, starve it until it dies. The modern man introduced earlier began to see this pattern clearly once he stopped searching for motivation and started observing his behavior honestly. He noticed something uncomfortable. Almost every productive action in his life required a condition. He worked best when he felt inspired. He trained only when he had time. He spoke confidently only when he felt safe. None of this was accidental. His entire life had been designed to protect him from discomfort, and that protection was exactly what made him weak. The first principle he encountered was elimination of dependency. Musashi warned against reliance on any single weapon, method, or condition, not because specialization is bad, but because dependence creates fragility. If your strength requires something external to function, then that external thing owns you. This idea alone shattered the man's self-image. He realized how much of his discipline depended on mood, environment, and approval, so he made a simple decision that felt almost insulting in its simplicity. One physical action, every day, no equipment, no schedule, no excuse. He chose push-ups, not because they were optimal, but because they were unavoidable. The floor was always there. His body was always there. There was nowhere to hide. The rule was brutal but clean. Do them anytime, anywhere, any condition, even sick, even tired, even busy, especially then. The number didn't matter as much as the rule. Never zero. This was the first crack in the old system, because for the first time, action was no longer negotiated. The body responded faster than expected, but the mind resisted immediately. On the days when energy was low, the excuses became louder. This is where most people quit, convinced something is wrong. But Musashi's system predicts this perfectly. Resistance isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign that a dependency is being removed. When the man did 5 push-ups on his worst day instead of 20 on his best, something shifted. He had proven something critical. His behavior no longer depended on how he felt. That realization led to the second layer, emotional non-reactivity. Physical discipline exposed how reactive his mind really was. Stress at work, tension at home, minor frustrations, all of it triggered automatic responses: defensiveness, avoidance, anger, anxiety. Musashi wrote extensively about maintaining the same mind in battle as in ordinary life. Calm when drinking tea, calm when facing death. Not because fear disappears, but because reaction does. The man began practicing this in moments that felt insignificant but weren't. Traffic, criticism, awkward silence. Instead of fixing the feeling, he observed it. Heart rate rising, jaw tightening, breath shortening. No judgment, no story, just sensation. This was harder than the push-ups. The body wanted action, the mind wanted escape, but he stayed. And something unexpected happened. The sensations peaked and then faded on their own. This is the point where the nervous system begins to change. When fear is observed without reaction, it loses its authority. It becomes information instead of a command. Over time, the threshold shifts. What once caused panic now caused recognition. What once caused paralysis now caused focus. This wasn't philosophy, it was training. Repetition under pressure. Just like Musashi trained with different weapons to remove reliance, the man trained with different emotional states to remove reactivity. But Musashi never separated mind from body. Calm without capability is delusion. The third layer of the system addressed this directly. Progressive physical overload, not for aesthetics, not for validation, but for proof. Proof that the body could endure more than the mind believed. The man set a target that felt unreasonable. 100 push-ups a day, every day, no exceptions, and not to show off. To confront the internal voice that said, "This is too much." The first days were humiliating, long breaks, shaking arms, time stretching endlessly. But something important was happening beneath the surface. The body was adapting, but more importantly, the mind was being retrained. The task no longer triggered negotiation, it triggered execution. By the third week, what once felt impossible felt inevitable. And inevitability is the foundation of confidence. Not confidence as a feeling, but confidence as a state of being. As the body hardened, the mind stabilized. Stressful situations no longer caused collapse. Difficult conversations no longer required rehearsal. The man wasn't braver, he was less fragile. This distinction matters. Courage still depends on fear. Stability does not. Musashi's writings point to this repeatedly. Victory comes not from aggression, but from absence of weakness. You don't need to overpower life if there is nothing in you for life to exploit. The next principle emerged naturally: continuity of awareness. Most people relax the moment effort ends. They finish the task and disconnect. Musashi warned against this. Awareness must remain after the action. Not tension, but presence. The man practiced this in small ways. Standing still after training, sitting quietly after conflict. Letting the nervous system settle without distraction. This integrated the lessons instead of discarding them. As weeks passed, something subtle but profound changed. He stopped identifying as someone who was trying to be disciplined. He no longer counted streaks or milestones, he simply acted. Training happened, observation happened, awareness remained. The system was no longer something he followed, it was something he lived inside. This is where Musashi's system becomes irreversible. When behavior no longer depends on motivation, relapse loses its power. Then came the test that reveals whether the system is real. External shock, unexpected pressure, loss. When the moment arrived, the reaction was almost disappointing in its simplicity. There was information, there was sensation, and then there was action. No spiral, no collapse, no drama. There is a moment in every real transformation that feels strangely anticlimactic. No celebration, no applause, no dramatic sense of arrival, just a quiet realization that something fundamental has shifted. The man who once struggled to hold himself together no longer feels the need to prove anything. He doesn't announce his discipline. He doesn't explain his calm. He doesn't seek reassurance that he's on the right path. And that is when the social consequences begin. People start reacting differently, not because he has become arrogant or distant, but because his presence removes the comfortable illusions they rely on to excuse their own weakness. This is the phase most people are never warned about. Strength, when it becomes identity, stops being inspirational. It becomes confrontational. Friends who once bonded over complaints grow silent around him. Colleagues stop venting, then stop confiding, then keep their distance. Even loved ones begin to say subtle things. You're too serious, you've changed, you need to relax. What they're really responding to is not his behavior, but the absence of excuses in his presence. When someone no longer negotiates with themselves, it exposes how often everyone else does. This is why Miyamoto Musashi warned that the final stages of mastery are lonely. Not because others abandon you intentionally, but because your way of being no longer reinforces their stories. Musashi lived simply, almost invisibly, despite his unmatched record. He did not collect titles or followers. He reduced his life instead of expanding it. Less attachment, less identity, less noise, until only the essential remained. The man began to understand this when he noticed something unsettling inside himself, the fear of losing what he had built. At first, discipline had felt empowering, but now there was a quiet anxiety underneath it. What if I stop? What if I slip? What if all of this disappears? This fear was subtle but dangerous, because it meant his strength was still something he possessed, not something he was. And anything you possess can be taken away. This is where most self-improvement systems fail. They create strong habits but fragile identities. The man realized that if his calm depended on streaks, routines, or external structure, then his strength was conditional. Musashi's final teaching addressed this directly. Let go of the self, not in a poetic sense, but in a practical one. Stop identifying with outcomes. Stop measuring yourself. Stop performing your discipline. Continue the practice, but remove the observer who wants credit for it. So he stopped counting, stopped tracking progress, stopped talking about his training, stopped framing his life as a transformation story. The actions remained, the awareness remained, the physical effort remained, but the narrative dissolved. He wasn't improving anymore. He was simply living according to what was necessary. And something unexpected happened. The fear vanished. Not because failure was impossible, but because failure no longer defined him. This is one of the most difficult shifts to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. When discipline becomes identity, effort disappears. Not because things are easy, but because resistance has no place to attach. He didn't wake up and decide whether to train. Training happened. He didn't prepare himself mentally for difficult conversations. Presence happened. He didn't force calm under pressure. There was nothing inside him that reacted violently enough to disturb it. This is why people describe this level of strength as inhuman, because it doesn't look like effort from the outside. There is no visible struggle, no emotional volatility, no dramatic highs and lows, just consistency, just reliability, just presence. And in a world addicted to stimulation and expression, that kind of stillness feels threatening. The man noticed another change as well. Life didn't feel lighter, but it felt cleaner. Problems still arose, loss still happened, uncertainty still existed, but there was no excess suffering layered on top, no catastrophizing, no identity crisis. When something ended, it ended. When something needed action, action followed. This is what Musashi meant by having deep roots. The wind doesn't stop. You simply stop being uprooted by it. Over time, even the sense of being strong faded. Strength implies contrast, weakness on one side, power on the other. But here, there was no comparison, there was only function. The same way you don't feel proud of breathing, he didn't feel proud of discipline. It was not a moral achievement, it was a biological and psychological baseline. Remove what interferes, and what remains is stability. This is the point where motivation culture collapses entirely. There is nothing to hype, nothing to sell, nothing to chase, just a way of living that refuses to accommodate weakness. And that is why so few people ever reach this stage, not because it's impossible, but because it offers no validation, no identity badge, no external reward. You don't become admired, you become dependable. You don't become exciting, you become solid. At the end of his life, Musashi wrote that he regretted nothing. That statement is not philosophical bravado, it is the logical outcome of a life with no internal contradiction. Regret comes from knowing you avoided what mattered, from knowing you negotiated when you should have acted, from knowing you chose comfort when you should have chosen capability. A life built on elimination leaves no room for that kind of reflection. The unsettling realization is this: nothing Musashi described is inaccessible. There is no secret technique, no rare temperament, no special genetics. The same body, the same nervous system, the same hours in a day. The only difference is willingness. Willingness to remove instead of add. Willingness to be uncomfortable without explanation. Willingness to let go of the version of yourself that needs permission to act. Most people will never do this. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They will choose comfort, distraction, and justification. They will call it balance, they will call it realism, and they will quietly live beneath their capacity. But if you follow this path, even mentally, you already know something they don't. Strength that scares others is not loud or aggressive. It is silent, it is stable, it is inevitable. The question is no longer what this level of mental and physical strength looks like. You've seen it. You've felt its weight. The real question is whether you are willing to eliminate everything that prevents it from emerging, because once you do, there is no going back, not because you are trapped, but because nothing inside you wants to return to weakness ever again.